All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're kicking things off with a question about a rule you've probably just accepted as absolute common sense, since you were sitting cross-legged on a kindergarten rug. You know the drill. We're told super early on exactly how the world works, how we're supposed to speak, and how to judge what's good and what's bad. But today we're going to put those basic, everyday assumptions under a serious microscope.
Now, you might instinctively say yes, obviously. I mean, it's what we're all taught, right? Always tell the truth, lying is bad, end of story. But we're going to use a little philosophy today to completely pull the rug out from under that belief. We're going to explore how we constantly label things as truths or lies without ever actually pausing to ask what truth itself really is. And it turns out, when you start questioning these supposedly simple words, you quickly realize just how many false beliefs we're unknowingly carrying around in our backpacks every single day.
Which brings us to part 1, the trap of violent hierarchies. To understand why we think the way we do, just picture a typical high school cafeteria. There's almost always this artificial ranking system, right? The popular kids are pushed right to the top, and everyone else gets pushed down. Well, the famous philosopher Jacques Derrida actually called binary structures like this violent hierarchies. It's when one concept is artificially elevated as superior, and the other is just automatically degraded as inferior. It's literally that same schoolyard idea that being first is inherently better than being second, or that up is somehow always better than down. They look neutral on the surface, but underneath, they are deeply, deeply unequal.
And this setup brilliantly illustrates exactly how we've trapped ourselves. We automatically put truth up on a pedestal as this ultimate superior good, and lie gets shoved down as the inferior bad. We've defined these concepts entirely as opposites. We're using a violent ranking system instead of actually trying to understand them. Truth is just seen as the absence of a lie, and a lie is just the absence of truth. But philosophy tells us that this so-called violence emerges precisely because of this ranking. Basically, we just stop thinking and we immediately start judging.
Okay, let's move on to our second section, truth, lies, and verification.
Let's untangle this first knot by asking a surprisingly tough question. What actually is the truth? Philosophy teaches us a pretty hard lesson here. Just repeating some juicy rumor you heard in the hallway, that doesn't make it true. Actually, even if your entire friend group absolutely believes it, belief still doesn't make it true. Truth is not an assumption. Truth is verity. It literally only exists after it goes through a very specific, rigorous test.
Think of it exactly like doing a simple science experiment in your chemistry lab. Step 1, you make a statement, a hypothesis. Step 2, you have to check it against material reality. You actually have to look at the physical evidence, the real ground of human understanding. And then step 3, that final result you get, that is what we call verity.
For example, let's say you're sitting in class and you state, "This table is made of wood." Well, how do you actually know? You don't just guess. You knock on it, you feel it, you verify it against material reality. Now, if it actually is wood, boom, your statement becomes true. But if you knock on it and realize, wait a second, this is actually made of cold, hard metal, then your statement becomes a lie.
So here is the absolute crucial point. Truth and lie are not these magical opposing enemies fighting some cosmic battle. They aren't light and dark. They are literally identical twins born from the exact same process. Both a truth and a lie are simply outcomes of checking reality. If your statement matches up with material events, it's true. If it totally contradicts material events, it's a lie. But they are both just end results of that same verification test.
That brings us to section 3, the waiting room of opinions.
Now, understanding this whole verification process completely flips how we use the word opinion. See, an opinion isn't just a lesser truth, and it's definitely not some polite little lie. An opinion is simply a statement that is literally sitting in a waiting room. It exists in this state of limbo because it just cannot be tested against material reality quite yet. It's kind of like handing in a big exam and waiting for your teacher to grade it. Until that grade actually comes back, your final score, it's just an opinion.
Think about a massive event, like a national election or a big championship game. If you ask, hey, who won last year? Well, that is a simple matter of verification. You just look at the scoreboard or the history books. There is zero room for opinion there. But if you make a statement like, our team is absolutely going to win the game tomorrow, that is an opinion. Why? Simply because the event hasn't happened yet. The material reality literally doesn't exist to be checked.
And honestly, this applies to massive real-world issues too. Even really intense controversial claims like stating an election was rigged, those are just opinions at first.
They exist entirely in the absence of verification. They sit right there in that waiting room until hard material evidence finally pushes them through the door, turning them into either a verified truth or a verified lie. Treating an unverified opinion as a guaranteed falsehood or a guaranteed truth is a massive mistake. And it's a mistake produced entirely by that binary, violent thinking we talked about earlier.
All right, get ready because here is Section 4, the morality plot twist.
So here is where we make our fatal mistake. We collapse two completely different categories into one. On one side, we have epistemology. Now, that's just a fancy academic word for the process of verifying facts. You know, our science experiment. But on the other side, we have morality. And morality operates on a totally different plane. It deals with harm, it deals with intention, and it deals with real-world consequences. Truth and lie, those are purely epistemic categories. They are absolutely not moral ones.
Just look at these incredibly real examples. A perfectly truthful news report about a horrific tragedy doesn't magically make the tragic act itself morally good, right? The truth is just describing reality. It doesn't justify it. On the flip side, imagine a student lying to a school bully just to protect their friend from getting beaten up. Epistemologically, that statement is a lie because it contradicts reality. But morally, it's a genuinely good act because it prevents harm. And conversely, telling a verifiable truth specifically to inflict pain on someone, that can be a deeply morally evil act.
Mixing these two things up creates some seriously rigid, dangerous confusion. When we blindly moralize truth and demonize lies without ever looking at the context, we aren't actually being ethical, not at all. We are just blindly following a violent hierarchy. A statement being factually true does not automatically make it morally right. And a statement being factually false absolutely does not make it morally bad. It's only by completely separating verification from morality that we can actually start to think clearly, ethically, and honestly. We really have to stop seeing the world in these overly simple black and white kindergarten terms. Truth is about reality. Morality is about humanity. Which leaves us with a pretty massive question as we wrap up this explainer. Now that you know exactly how to dismantle these violent hierarchies, how are you going to judge the very next truth you encounter in your daily life? Are you just going to accept it because it sounds right, or are you going to run the experiment? Keep questioning, keep verifying, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.